Once again, good morning. And for our next lesson, we have the chemical properties of minerals. Last week, we were able to discuss the physical properties of minerals. We were able to identify minerals in terms of their color, their strength, their tenacity, their luster. In short, the physical properties. Okay, now, we will be identifying chemicals, or minerals, rather, in terms of their chemical properties. Now guys, we only have two major types or major classification of minerals. Okay, the first one, we have the silicate. Okay? Silicate, as we have discussed, na i-present na natin ito during our discussion in solar system, that a protoplanet was formed by a collision of metallic materials and silicate materials. Ano po ba ang ibig sabihin ng silicate materials? When we say silicate, it contains the atoms or the elements of silicon and oxygen. Take note of the term "and". Okay? Palagi po silang magkasama. Okay? If a mineral contains the atoms or the elements of silicon and oxygen, automatic, that will be a silicate. And it is the most abundant minerals in the Earth's crust. Besides, kung kayo po ay kukuha ng bato, or even buhangin, no? Kahit dumakot lang kayo ng buhangin dyan sa inyong labas, you can get silicate, no? Lots of silicate minerals doon sa buhangin na yon. Ganoon po ka-abundant ang mga silicate minerals. Now, there are other minerals na hindi silicate. Yun po yung mga tinatawag nating non-silicate. Paano po natin malalaman na ito ay non-silicate? Madali lang po. Non-silicates contains either silicon or oxygen. Pwedeng present yung silicon, pero wala yung oxygen. Pwedeng present yung oxygen, pero wala yung silicon. Pwedeng wala yung pareho. If that's the case, we have a non-silicate minerals. These non-silicate minerals are not as abundant as silicate minerals. Hindi po sila ganoon karami. Okay? Kaya some of them are very pricey, no? Medyo mahal ang mga non-silicate minerals. May mga non-silicate minerals po na mahal. Now, let us try to discuss each of them. No? Katulad po ng pinag-usapan natin kanina. When we say silicate class, they are considered as the largest and abundant group of minerals that contains the silicon and oxygen elements. Okay? Combined with other metals such as aluminum, magnesium, iron, and calcium. They are considered to be the most important of all mineral classes. An example of silicate class is the feldspar. Kung papansinin po ninyo ang feldspar, we have here the atomic composition or the chemical formula of feldspar. We have the sodium, aluminum, silicon, and oxygen. We have the silicon and oxygen here. That makes it a silicate. Okay? Next, we have the quartz, made up of magnesium, iron, silicon, and oxygen. That makes it a silicate. Lastly, we have the garnet. We have the iron, aluminum, and silicon and oxygen. That makes it a silicate. So, lahat po ng mga silicate, meron silang silicon and oxygen atoms. Okay? Kaya po abundant tayo ng mga silicate minerals ay dahil doon pa lang sa formation ng solar system, nag-accumulate na ang mga silicate materials, no? Sa formation pa lamang po ng Earth. Beside, ang ating pong mantle ay made up of silicate rocks. Okay? Not only silicate rocks, meron pa pong ibang mga minerals or ibang mga elements ang present sa ating pong mantle. Now we have the carbonate class. Carbonate class is one of the non-silicate class of mineral. Katulad po ng sinabi natin kanina, when we say non-silicate minerals, it contains either the element of silicon or oxygen. Or neither. Pwedeng wala sa dalawang elemento na yon. Halimbawa po ang carbonate. The carbonate is based on the carbonate ion. Carbon and oxygen. Dapat po, nandun yung carbon. Okay? Pansinin po ninyo, wala yung silicon. Okay? Walang silicon dyan. That is why we call it non-silicate. Kasi wala yung silicon, pero nandyan yung oxygen. A carbonate class has a carbon and oxygen atoms. And these minerals are commonly formed in sedimentary and oxidizing environments. Saan po ba madalas ang mga sedimentary environments? Sa mga bundok. No? Sa mga bundok. We have three groups of carbonate class. We have the calcite, the dolomite, and aragonite. And guys, this dolomite, matunog siya ngayon. Why? This is the mineral that they use in the beautification of the Manila Bay. So, the Manila Bay is made up of dolomite, which is now which is a mineral. No? Yun yung ginamit nila. Saan po nila kinuha ang dolomite? Sa Cebu. Saan sa Cebu? Sa mga bulubundukin lugar. No? Sedimentary environments. Now, let us check the chemical formula of each. Calcite is made up of calcium, carbon, and oxygen atoms. The presence of carbon and oxygen makes it a carbonate. Kaya siya tinawag na carbonate. The dolomite is made up of magnesium and carbon and oxygen plus calcium and carbon and oxygen. Parang calcite ito, oh. No? Pero tinawag siyang dolomite dahil meron siyang ibang component which is magnesium and carbonate. Magnesium carbonate. Okay? That makes it a carbonate. Aragonite, on the other hand, is made up of calcium and carbon-oxygen atoms. Sir, bakit pareho po sa calcite? Bakit po pareho? Pareho lang po talaga. Just like graphite and diamond. They are both made up of carbon but different in structure. Okay? Magkaiba po ang kanilang atomic structure. So that is carbonate, one of the non-silicate class. Let us now have the sulfate. Sulfate, baka dito po kayo malito sa silicate at saka sa sulfate. Sulfate class forms in areas with high evaporation rates, no? Sa mga lugar na medyo mainit at matubig, and where salty waters slowly evaporate. Saan po ito? Sa mga malapit sa dagat. Okay? Mga beaches. Yan yung mga areas with high evaporation rates. It is composed of, ano yung S? S is sulfur. Okay? So it is made up of sulfur and oxygen atoms. Okay? S is sulfur. Si is silicon. Remember that. Baka malito po kayo kapag nakita po ninyo yung SO, akala ninyo silicon oxygen. At ang isagot ninyo ay silicate instead of sulfate. Okay? Sulfate can be also spelled as SULPHAT. Okay? Pareho lang pong tama yan. Now, let's have an example. Anhydrite, okay, is made up of the elements calcium, sulfur, and oxygen. Sulfur and oxygen, that makes it sulfate. We also have the celestine here. made up of strontium, sulfur, and oxygen atoms. That makes it a sulfate. Lastly, we have the gypsum. The gypsum na diniscuss po natin as a mineral used, no, to as a ceiling, no, as a board sa ceiling, no. It is made up of calcium, sulfur, oxygen, hydrogen, and oxygen atoms. Okay? That makes it a sulfate. Next, we have the halide class. Remember that non-silicates, no, can either contain silicon, either contain oxygen, or neither. Wala sa dalawang yon. Okay? Now, halide class are natural salt. Halide minerals contains natural salt and includes the fluorite, the halite, the sylvite, and the sal-ammoniac. Sal-ammoniac, magkahiwalay po ito, no? Sal-ammoniac components. Usually, they form in lakes, sa mga ponds, and other landlocked such as Dead Sea and the Great Salt Lake. Okay? An example of halide class are the halite, the sylvite, and the fluorite. The halite, or also known as the rock salt, ito po yung ating asin, ay gawa sa sodium chloride. Pansinin po ninyo, NaCl. Walang oxygen. Walang silicon. Okay? But it is a mineral under the halide class. Remember po, halide class can be made up of or a combination of chlorine, fluorine, bromine, and iodine. Lahat ng may in. No? Kung ihahalo po natin ang sodium sa chlorine, yan po ay magiging asin. Ang potassium at chlorine ay pinaghalo, yan po ay magiging sylvite. Ang calcium hinalo sa fluorine, yan po ay magiging fluorite. Okay? So these three belongs to the halide class of minerals. Okay? Tandaan po ninyo yung mga sinabi kong elements. Okay? Kapag nakita nyo na ang chlorine, ang bromine, ang fluorine, at ang iodine, at wala po ang oxygen, wala si silicon, wala si sulfur, okay? Wala si phosphate, yan po ay halide. Kakaintindihan po? Okay. Next, we have the oxide class. From the word itself, oxide. It contains oxygen. Okay? The oxygen is binded to one or more metal alloys. One or more metal alloys. Ano-ano po ba yung mga metals natin? We have iron, no? Ano pa ba? Chromium. Ganun nga ba yung bigkas nun? Chromium. The hydroxide-bearing minerals are typically included in the oxide class. And several species of oxide minerals are also quite useful for industrial purposes and hold significant economic value. Mahal po ang mga oxide class. No? We have the example, we have the hematite or gawa po sa iron and oxygen elements. We also have the magnetite na gawa din po sa iron and oxygen. Pansinin po ninyo, pareho po silang gawa sa iron and oxygen, pero magkaiba po yung atomic number nila. Okay? Magkaiba yung bilang ng kanilang atomic number. We also have the chromite here, made from iron, chromium, and oxygen atoms. Okay? Next, we have the sulfide. Okay? Balikan po natin yung sulfate kanina. Ito naman ay sulfide. When we say sulfide, it can be spelled as S-U-L-P-H-I-D-E. When we say sulfide, any member of a group of compounds no, of sulfur with one or more metals. It is a sulfur combined with one or more metals. Yan po ang karakteristik ng sulfide. Ang sulfate po, may oxygen siyang kasama. Ang sulfide, sulfur lamang. Okay? Madalas po, kinocombine natin ang sulfur sa iron, sa copper, sa nickel, sa lead, sa cobalt, sa silver, and zinc. Now, copper sulfide ay gawa po sa copper and sulfur atoms na tinatawag po nating covalent. Okay, ito yan, covalent. Now, acantite naman po ay gawa sa silver, which is Ag, and sulfur, which is S, na tinatawag naman nating acantite. Lastly, we have the galena. Galena is made from lead. Pb is lead, and S is sulfur. Okay, remember, the sulfate is made up of sulfur and oxygen atoms. Ang sulfide naman po ay gawa lamang sa sulfur, combined with other metals. Next, we have the phosphate. Okay, phosphates contains the tetrahedrally coordinated phosphate. Okay, ito po ang kailangan natin makita, PO4. No? PO4. Kailangan nandyan si PO4. Kasi, ito po yung pinagkaiba niya. Tetrahedrally. Yung composition po niya. Okay? So, papansinin po ninyo, the phosphates are used as well as a fertilizer in growing food. And nakikita din po natin ang mga phosphate sa ngipin, sa buto ng maraming mga animals. Even us, may phosphate po ang ating mga ngipin at buto. An example of a phosphate class are chlorophytite na gawa po sa calcium, doon sa tetrahedrally coordinated phosphate or the PO4 and chlorine. This PO4 makes it a phosphate. We also have here the hydroxylapatite na gawa naman po sa calcium, sa phosphate, and oxygen and hydrogen atoms. Okay? Sa quiz po ninyo at exam, nagbibigay po ako ng mga chemical formula. No? All you have to do is to choose or state what class of mineral is that. Okay? Pansinin nyo na lang po. Lastly, we have the native element class. When we say native element class, these are minerals that are composed of atoms from a single element only. No? Atoms of a single element. Ibig sabihin, wala pong ibang halo. Ang copper, no? It is a native element mineral. Ang gold, a native element mineral. Ang bismuth, no? These are all example of elements na minerals in other case. Ang graphite po, ito ay isang native element mineral which is made from carbon. Even diamond, made from carbon, kinukonsider din po natin siyang native element class.